Welcome to another A-Level Computer Science Masterclass. This week we're going to be looking at HTML and JavaScript. For this particular lesson you are going to require a REPL account, which you can sign up for free on at repl.it, and there will be a link below this video. So in this lesson we're going to be looking at creating structure in web pages using HTML, creating styling using CSS or cascading style sheets, and also creating interactive web pages using JavaScript. Now this is an awful lot to look at in one lesson, so we'll just be scratching the surface to understand what each of these three things allow us to do and also why we use them. So one of the things we're going to look at is using REPL to create a website, but also how to set up the basics of your web page. So I'm going to make the assumption that you have never seen an HTML web page before, and we're just going to talk through it. Now, just down here, you will find a link to the page that I'm using, but you'll also find that embedded down below in the tasks for this particular video. So let's have a little look and see how we go through this particular one. So you can see here I have selected HTML and CSS and also JS. Now that stands for JavaScript. I've then given this a meaningful name, which means that I can then go back to my REPLs and I can see what I've done before. And it takes a little bit of time for it to load. And that's because at the moment lots of people are using this system. So don't worry about the unable to wake up, just give it a little bit of time and it will load. Okay, so let's have a little look and see what it is that we are doing in terms of our web pages. So we have our different tags. Now the top one is HTML, and you can see here what I'm doing is I'm doing a little comment, and adding comments to the web pages is really helpful because what you're going to be able to do is leave yourself little notes. Now something that you want to remember to do is do a little tag, an exclamation mark and a dash to open, type in whatever it is that you want to leave yourself, and then close it using a dash and close. So you can see there I've written HTML, this is the tag for a web page, and HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Now the head of a web page is where the thinking happens, and that means that you can type in things to tell the browser, like the title, like your keywords, links to your style sheet, all that important thing that you don't actually see on the web page, but you do have to tell the browser. Now that means if the head is where the thinking happens, the body is the bit that you actually see on the web page. So anything that you actually want to show on screen, you need to make sure it's in between the start and the end tag of the body. Now what I mean by the end tag is if I have a body tag like this, that opens, and if I close a tag I have a /. So that means the end. This is the scope. Anything in between them is actually inside that tag. So at the top here on line 7 you can see that I have a link tag. Now that links me to my style sheet. So this is the style of the whole website, and anything inside that style sheet will be now applied to this particular page because I have used a link tag. So anything that you can see on this web page is potentially an HTML tag that you need to remember for your exam. And that's one of the reasons why we would use comments across some really basic web pages, because it allows you to remember what they actually mean. So the last one is my script tag down here on line 12, and on line 12 it is a source tag. So script basically means that I've got some script for my web page, some programming. Source is where I can find it, src, and it's in a page called script.js. So that is an external JavaScript file. Now we can do this in two ways. We can directly put a script tag into the head of our web page, and that means that you can add in all sorts of program code directly into the page. Or you can be a little bit more efficient and create some modular code where you take that JavaScript and you place it into a separate page. Now, you may see a lot of things that say that that's a little bit more secure and it stops people from being able to see your code, but actually that's complete rubbish because actually when you run your code, any script, any JavaScript that you run within your web page is going to be open and visible by everybody. The only way to prevent people from actually seeing your program code is to use server-side scripting, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail when we actually look at JavaScript. So we have set up our web page, we know that we've got our HTML tags, we've got a head for the thinking, and we've got a body for the content. So let's go and add some content. In terms of content, it's the structure of our web page, and the structure of our web page comes from HTML tags. So if we have a look at this one, what we are going to do is we're actually going to add some tags into the body of our web page. So what you can see going on here is I'm going to start putting some headings. Now headings, there are 7 of them. And they are super easy to work out because what we have here is an H1. H1 is the top heading, it's the most important, and using basic styling it will be the largest. You can see there I start off with an H1 tag, put the content that I actually want inside, and then I close it again using that /. Now H2 is a subheading, and that means it's a little bit smaller, and when Google goes through there, or Yahoo, or whatever search engine it is, they will look for the H1 tags first for the most important titles, then the H2 for the subtitles, H3 onwards, H7 not very important at all. So I'm just going to remind you, open my H1 tag, pop in my title or my wording that I want for the top heading, and then I close it with a / H1. Now the next one is a P. A P is a paragraph. So these ones here are headings, and they go from 1 to 7. Then we have a paragraph, and that allows you to put standard text in there. Now a paragraph is really useful because what it does is it creates a little bit of space before, and it also creates a line break underneath. So your P uses an open P tag at the beginning, all of the text, and then a closing P tag to close the paragraph. Now if I run this, what I'm going to do is just remove some of these. There we go, we can actually see what's going on. You have here title at the top, H2, H3 getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then your paragraph underneath in standard text size. And right now I actually don't have any styling on my web page, so this is almost like I have a really basic output. Now the other thing you want to make sure that you know for your exam is how to create lists. So when we are creating important lists inside our web pages, or even inside things like Word documents, we put them in bulleted lists. So I put an H4 of what we're going to cover, and then what I'm going to do is create an ordered list. So an ordered list is an OL. That means if I want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, that gives me my ordered list. Every single item within my ordered list, so number 1, number 2, number 3, is a list item, so an LI tag. Now, I'm making a big deal out of these because they come up again and again and again inside the exam paper for OCR and also for CIE. So we're going to make a big note at this point, and you're going to keep an eye on how it works. So we start off with OL, ordered list. There's your opening tag. Inside the list, you're going to have list items with the data, and then close each one. So opening list item, closing the list item. That creates the next one. At the end of your list items, you then need to close the list tag. So this is a little bit like saying, I have finished my bulleted list, or I have finished my numbered list. And this is where it ends, and the next one will be something like a paragraph. So you can see here I've actually indented them, which makes life a little easier. It makes it easier to actually see. So my ordered list would look like this. You can see there I've got 1, 2 and 3, and it automatically orders it for me. Now if I didn't want that to be an ordered list and I simply wanted bullet points, I would make that an unordered list. So I would change the O for a U, UL for unordered list. Now if I leave everything alone, list items are the same, and press run again, you'll see that 1, 2, 3 now goes bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Really, really quick way of popping in an ordered list, and you do need to remember this one for your exam. So next up, we're going to make our web page actually look nice, or not in this case. When you are playing with CSS, rather than creating something that actually looks rather beautiful, the best way is actually to make it look horrific, but show that you can change the styling. In your exam, you'll be given specific styles. However, if you are playing about with CSS and you want to see the changes really obviously, you are going to make it look pretty awful. So let's have a look. In here, what I am going to do is I'm going to start off by adding an extra paragraph. So we've already got one paragraph, but I'm going to add another one. And the reason I'm adding another one is because I want to add some more data to our web page that I can show you a paragraph that looks as a paragraph styling and a paragraph that we are actually going to give some slightly different styling to. Because what you can do is you can actually identify a particular item. So in this case, you are going to create your own after the video, or you can pause it and have a go after this one. In this case, I have got my standard P tag. Now I'm going to start styling that standard P tag in a bit, but for this one, I'm also going to give it a class. So you can see here, I'm typing in style, I want to style it, and I'm going to give it a special name. And in this case, I'm going to call this one new style, because I want to just come up with a name that means something to me for this particular tutorial. However, you want to make sure that these are meaningful. Now, when we do this, rather than saying the style is new style, it's actually a class of new style. A class basically means I have set out styling for this particular area. So I'm now going to go into my style.css file, which at the moment is empty, and we know it's empty because we have all of the standard styling over on the right hand side. I'm then creating a P tag, and I'm showing all of the scope by using curly braces. I'm going to set the color. This is the text color. Just use the word color. Note that it is the American style of color, not the British spelling. So it is C-O-L-O-R. If you try and spell it the British way, I was about to say correctly, if you spell it the British way, it will not work. And then going to give it a font family. Now a font family, basically what it does is the browser looks for your first choice. If that particular font is not installed, it will go for the next one. And if that one isn't installed, it will go for the final one. So you can see there at the end of every line, I've also added in a colon. So when I run this, all of my P tags at this style go this strange sort of violet purpley colour, and then go to Courier New. So that was my first choice of font. Then I'm going to create new style. Now notice, before I do new style, I place a dot. That means it's a class in the CSS file. Same curly braces. This time I'm going to colour it blue, just to see the difference. Now I told you it wouldn't look good, and the reason it doesn't look good is because we are making sure they are very, very different. I'm then going to give it a slightly different font family. So in this case, I am going to select Fantasy. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's installed in my browser, so it might not come up. It might go back to the original. And the last thing I'm going to do on this one is I'm actually going to add a background colour. Remember colour, spelled the American way. Background colour sort of highlights it as well, so it gives it like a line behind it of colour. And I'm going to stick in some aquamarine because it's a nice sort of, we're looking for things that are going to really stand out for us. We can see that they have happened. Doesn't need to look good. Right, so this paragraph right now, because I have given it a class of new style in the HTML, it goes into the CSS file and it looks for new style with a dot before it and applies that particular styling. It will override the standard paragraph. So classes have a higher priority than a standard style. Okay, so there are lots of different things that you can do with CSS. I've shown you the color, I've shown you some text, some fonts. Some of the other things you might want to have a look at will be also things like layout, but generally in your exam they will focus on the visual aspect. So CSS is all about styling, HTML is about structure. The final thing we want to talk about is interactivity. And that's when you actually get to put some program code into your HTML. Notice I said you get to put some program code. We haven't used any yet because HTML is a markup language, which means it tells the browser the structure of the page. CSS is a styling language, which means it tells the browser about the styling. But JavaScript is a scripting language, which means it's a programming language. So in this case, JavaScript sits under our client-side scripting. And then you've got some other things for server-side. Now, it's really important at this stage that you do make sure you differentiate between Java and JavaScript. Although they both use the word Java, they are two totally different programming languages. So JavaScript is the one that is used with web pages, it is client-side. Java itself, totally different. Server-side scripting happens on the actual server, unsurprisingly, but I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. But the examples of these that you might see on a web page would be something like PHP, C#, things like that. So all the website scripting languages. When we talk about client side, that means that it is run inside the browser. That means the code is actually sent from the server over to the browser, and the browser is the one that's doing all the processing. So you don't have to keep sending data back and forth to the server. Server-side scripting is run on the server. That means the actual script itself, so the programming runs on the server, it generates new dynamic HTML and sends that, so it sends the data as HTML over to the browser. So I'm going to put here, if you served. Basically, when we talk about served as HTML, it means it's translated. And if you're not sure about translators, now's an excellent time to pause this and go back to the one on translators. So the actual running in the browser means it's translated in the browser, the user's computer is doing all the work, but the downside of that is anything in terms of passwords can be seen. So I talked earlier about having JavaScript files in a separate file not being any more secure. And that's because they're all passed to the browser, so the user can essentially see everything. And it's for that reason that JavaScript in its native format is not able to access things like files and databases. The newer versions of JavaScript, so jQuery and other things like that, there is far more that you can do with them, and then there's sort of a hybrid of client-side, server-side. So if you want to do anything which is secure or uses any kind of database, then you want to be using this one over here, not your JavaScript. However, your JavaScript is really useful for small interactivity things like validating data or verification, making sure that what they've typed in is what they meant to type in. You may as well do that on the browser, then you don't have to send anything over to the server until you know it's correct. So let's start off by having a look at some really basic JavaScript methods. And this is the kind of thing that we would want to be looking at. So you can see we've kind of got to the point where we have created something on our web page, we've given it a little bit of styling, and the next thing we want to do is to start by creating some interactivity for our user. Now, in terms of interactivity, what we're going to do is we're going to hide this list that we've created at the bottom. And I'm going to do that by using a div tag. And a div tag is a divider. It allows you to box little things out inside your HTML. So I'm just going to write that one up here because these are useful. Div tags are dividers. Generally, not something you can see on the page, but it allows us to give them IDs. And you can see on this one, I've given it an ID of answer. That means it has a unique name on the page, which means I can call this particular one. So you can see it opens on line 25 and closes on line 31, and anything inside it is part of that particular divider. I'm now going to go into my external JavaScript file, and I'm going to create a function. Now, we call everything that JavaScript does a function because technically the return value is what it shows on the page. So be really careful with your functions and procedures on this one. So I've created a thing called function and I've called it show answer. In terms of JavaScript, our scope is shown using our curly braces. So in this one, what I am doing is I'm doing show answer. I have opened up my brackets because it's a function. I've then opened up my curly brackets to give the scope. And I'm going to use a thing called document.getElementById. Document is my HTML document. GetElementById is to get one of my tags using the ID that I've just given it. I called it answer. And that's what I'm going to do. So inside the brackets, then inside double quotes, I'm going to put answer. And what that allows me to do is to get an actual object. And I'm going to place it into a variable. The nice thing about JavaScript is you use var to show this is a variable. I'm going to call it my answer. In this case, I've done var my answer. Then I'm going to say my answer equals document.getElementById. Now what that will do is it will place the object. So instead of having to do document.getElementById all the time, I'm placing it into a smaller variable name. That way, what I can then do is I can then make it do something. So I'm going to do my answer dot style, a bit like a CSS. So dot style, and then I'm going to use a particular style element. So in this case, you can see that I'm doing another dot, and then I'm going to put display. Now display says whether to put it on the page or not. And in this case, I want to, when I show my element or show my list, I want to show it as a block. Block basically means put it on the page. So style.display equals block will show. Now that means I'm going to have to go back into my HTML and actually apply an original style that hides it. Now you can do visible equals true and visible equals false, but what that will do is it will leave a great big blank page. So in this case, style again, and we do all of our styles. This is an inline style rather than CSS. Display, it goes into double quotes. So display none means don't even put it on the page. Don't serve it to the browser so it doesn't leave a weird little blank space. So in this case, display equals none, and then I need to actually make my function be callable. So in our normal code, we would just sort of call a function. However, when we're talking about web pages, we need to have some kind of event that calls the function. And in this case, it's a button click. So I've created a button. It has an on-click event. That means when I click the button, it calls show answer, which happens to be in my script file. When I close the button tag, I put click to find out. That's going to create me the text, and then I close the button tag. So show answer is the same as the show answer in the script file. Now that means that it is just going to call it. Now you need to make sure you do put the brackets in there, otherwise it'll only call it once. So you can see there, I've now got click to find out. You click the button and it appears on the page. And what it's doing is it's actually doing a bit of a page refresh, and it reserves the HTML, but it changes the style of that div tag, so that little divider, from hidden to visible, or in this case, from our show. So we're talking about our display. Our display was none, don't display it, to display it as a block. Now, CSS has a load of things that you can play with in terms of JavaScript. So you can style things, you can change the CSS, you can change the inner HTML, and the inner HTML is what's actually inside the opening and the closing tags. And some of these elements are part of your practice tasks this week.